morning. Welcome. My name is Crystal. I am the marketing manager for itracks, and I am super excited to introduce to you today's speaker. But before I do that, I am going to go through a couple of really quick housekeeping items. So first, yes, we will be sending out a recording of today's webinar. So that will come to your email from me once we've had time to get the recording processed. Also, we will be doing a Q&A during this webinar. So if you have any questions, please submit them into the Q&A panel on your little Zoom toolbar. It's in the same toolbar that if you're successfully using the chat, you'll find it there. Mine's at the bottom. I know sometimes they're in different spots. You might have to move your mouse around, but it will say Q&A and have a little question mark. So that's where you submit the questions. And then we will, Mike and myself will be able to see them, and we can either message you one-on-one or answer them live at the end of the presentation. If we don't get to your question because we run out of time, then we can email you later too. We'll have them all recorded. So with that, let's get you acquainted with today's speaker. Mike Lakusta is the CEO and co-founder of Ethnifacts, LLC. He's a 45-year veteran of the consumer products industry, and he has worked on the growth and development of a ton of brands that you've heard of. So as you'll see demonstrated in the project that Mike is sharing with you today, Ethnifacts is an innovative research firm focused on the intersection of personality and culture and how those drive consumer behavior. So recently they worked with Coca-Cola, AT&T, Telemundo, Bacardi, Molson Coors, NBC Universal, Nielsen, all sorts of companies, including the Wine Market Council, which is the project that you're going to hear about today, and is a project for which they've received a ton of press, which has kept Mike very busy as he travels around sharing the inside scoop. So we're very fortunate and thankful that he included us in this webinar on his list of stops. And with that, I'm going to hand things over to Mike Lakusta. So take it away, Mike.
Fantastic. Thank you, Crystal. Really appreciate that introduction. I really don't need to say much more, but thank you for introducing us as who is Ethnifacts. We are a knowledge and insights provider, really dealing in culture and personality, a lot of multicultural work, cross-cultural metrics, and that has become such a third rail hot button in the United States lately. But the consumer is the consumer, and that's the important thing. It's not about management or promotions or anything. It's about who the consumer is. And if you're going to appeal to young people in the United States, you have to deal with the multicultural population. So we've developed a lot of constructs over the years that have been embedded into the Nielsen home scan panel and MRI Simmons and other things. One thing I would invite you to do, if you'd like, there's a website there, ethnifacts.com. You can go to that, go to Our Work Nielsen, and there's about 35 reports that we've been involved in writing and designing over the years for them. They call it their DIS reports, Diverse Intelligence Series. So every year they do an in-depth report on the Hispanic, the African American, the Asian, and very often the LGBTQ market. And we've been very involved with those over the years. So you can access about 35 of those on our website if you're curious. There's some good things there. We've done a lot of work lately with the CDC in the United States. Maternal morbidity is a very big issue among women that die within a year after having their baby postpartum. So particularly in the African American community, that's been a major push for the CDC, and they've started a campaign called Hear Her. And we've done a lot of research and tracking on that over the years, and we're very proud, of that work as well. So that's who we are. And then who is the Wine Market Council, which is who put out the RFP for this particular study that we won and we, conducted and largely won because of what itracks provided us, which was a ability to be at the point of purchase with the consumer, which was invaluable. As we all know, focus groups may happen in one city and you have 8 people in a room that are influencing each other. You can do them online and get people from other areas, but the ability to actually be at where the action is, the point of purchase, both retail and on-premise in a bar or a restaurant, was what won us this study. So the Wine Market Council has been around since 1996. They probably have about 200 members who are wineries, distributors, suppliers, councils, et cetera, advocacy groups that are members. It's not that expensive if you're interested in it. They typically produce 3 to 4 research studies per year, and they take a vote of their members every year and say, what keeps you up at night? What's the most important thing you want to learn about? And what they wanted to learn about last year in 2024 was two things, one being multicultural consumers and one being young consumers. And as I'll show you in a minute, those two go hand in hand. So we won both of those studies in a sense and combined them into one study, trying to learn what Gen Z and millennials want from wine. And it was very fascinating because there's so much negative press out there right now. So the Wine Market Council does these research studies, and we won that RFP. They do webinars and conferences. They provide data files and sorting and sharing. And believe me, this is a small snippet of what we provided, but the qual deck, which was all done through the itracks platform, is about a 140-page deck. And then we did a quant study with 1,800 people afterwards, which is another 140-page deck. So there's a lot of information here that came out of all this. And the qual fed the quant, as many of you do in your studies. So a lot of really interesting things came out of what we did with the iTrack software. Why did we do this? Why did the Wine Market Council members vote for this particular topic? Well, this is just a little taste of some of the negative things that are out there about alcohol and about the wine business. We've seen a lot of this. The World Health Organization is talking about no alcohol is good for you. Well, wine's been around for 6,000 years. So, the members kind of think that maybe there is something to the fact that it's been part of relaxation and comfort and sharing for all those years, and that there are particularly health benefits of resveratrol and the things in wine as well. But because of all these things that are going on, because of a health and wellness trend, particularly with younger people, because of cannabis now being legal in 39 states in some form in the United States, the little thing on the right there is right off of my Facebook page, something that I got, which was "Goodbye Wine" from marijuana gummies. There's a lot of pressure on the wine industry about what's going on and the fact that Gen Z and millennials are not drinking alcohol or wine as much as they should. Thus, a study needed to be done. So what is the rationale? How did we, what tack did we take in presenting this RFP, and how did we win this study, and why did we do this study? Well, one of the first things we talked about is if you're going to talk about young multicultural consumers or young consumers, Gen Z and millennials in the US, you've got to be talking about multicultural. And this is data. A lot of what we do, we operate as what Nielsen calls their pop facts department, their population facts. So we do a lot of demographic work with the US Census. And, we started with this to say, okay, this is age deciles in the United States. And if you look at people that are over 70 years old, 77% of those people are non-Hispanic white. And then as you move to the left, by the time you get to the youngest decile from 0 to 9, only 48% of those people are non-Hispanic white. So again, if you're talking about young people, you've got to be talking about multiculturals in the US. And in the bottom left are census projections. This is what they expect in the United States. And this is despite what might happen with immigration. The census releases three different projections every year, one for high immigration, one for low, and one for zero. And despite any of these things that are going on with immigration right now, the multicultural population is going to grow because of their younger age, their childbearing years, and the fact that they are already here. It's not about new people coming in anymore. So the census projects between now and 2060, 68% of the growth in the United States will be Hispanic, 22% will be African American, 23 Asian, and then 12% other. Now, what's really interesting is that light blue line below the baseline there, which is non-Hispanic white, which will be negative 27%. So because non-Hispanic whites in the US are 15 years older, because they're moving beyond their childbearing years, they're going to actually decline. And that's what people don't realize in the US is that compound effect of growing multicultural, declining non-Hispanic white is going to make all this happen much faster. In fact, what we led with was the fact that if you look at the legal drinking age population, LDA as they call it in the industry, people that are hitting 21 years old, you can see the portion that'll be non-Hispanic white, the portion that'll be Hispanic, Black, and Asian. And what you get is only one of 10 10% of new 21-year-old consumers in the US will be non-Hispanic white between this 10-year period. So obviously, they needed to do the study and understand multiculturals. On top of that, generational buying power is very important because according to the CDC, Asians and Hispanics in the United States tend to live longer, significantly longer, and their median age is much younger. So when you compound those two things, if you get the loyalty of the Hispanic buyer in the United States, you get about 14 more years of buying power out of that consumer once they become loyal to your product. And for an Asian consumer in the US, it's about 12. And for an African American consumer, it's more. So again, that compound effect, that ROI on the lifetime of that consumer makes a multicultural study important. And thus, that's why we have a company. And that's why we love to do this work with cultural populations. Now, there's a lot of words on this page, but this is the approach and the methodology of this research initiative. So what we wanted to do, we had done a foundational research project for them about 4 years ago. But we wanted to get really more in depth to understand the buying journey, the wine buying journey in a funnel from awareness to consideration, purchase, retention, and then advocacy. How do you go out and be an advocate for wine to your friends and family and influencers and things like that? So, what really intrigued them, to be honest with you, probably the biggest factor that won this project for us was the ability to use itracks software and to be at the point of purchase with these consumers. So I will talk a lot, excuse me, in just a moment about how we structured the sample because that was critical. But the fact that we could get 27 participants, which may not sound like a lot, but the detail that went into trying to make sure that this was a representative sample of what we were trying to achieve was very, very, very important. What we did is we used itracks to do 27 online shopping trips where we said, okay, pick your favorite place to buy wine online. And you'll see the kind of places they chose in a minute. And we want to shop along with you to understand the journey from how you first search, what you look at, what you notice, what you put in your basket, all the way to before you put your credit card in. We didn't want to see your credit card, but we took it all the way to that point. And so we had 27 videos of online shopping trips. And then we asked them to pick their favorite location to buy wine. And we made sure it was balanced for retail locations and on-premise, restaurant, club, et cetera, things like that, where they actually consume it at the premise. So that was another 27 engagements. So we did about 20 minutes average on the online, and then about an hour and 15 minutes, which was a very long interview at the point of purchase with these consumers. So the net was 54 engagements and over 46 hours of buying video footage. Now, the Wine Market Council loved that because remember, they have 200 members who all want a voice in the research. And, many of you have done research for clients on this. Imagine having 200 people with an opinion about what to do with the research. So the fact that we could get these recordings and that they could be involved and they could see them and, suggest questions and things where we might be able to take this as time went on was stellar for them. They loved it, and that was part of why we won this project. So thank you, itracks. Moving on, this is the journey. So 5 steps in the wine buying journey. That's where we wanted to take this study from awareness, consideration, purchase, retention, advocacy. So taking a potential young multicultural consumer all the way to being a loyal advocate for wine and developing a roadmap for activation. What are the action steps that these people that are winemakers, suppliers, distributors, importers, et cetera, what can they do at every one of these 5 different steps to influence what this consumer is doing? That was the purpose of the study. So what did we do? Once we won the project, we had to come along with a sample plan. And we call it a shop along at retail and a tag along at on-premise. That's what we were doing. And a lot of work went into making sure we were representative. So this is the physical and virtual retail at the top, and then the on-premise and virtual retail at the bottom, because everybody did the virtual retail, the online shopping, as well as either a physical retail or a physical on-premise event. So we took our sample, Hispanic, non-Hispanic white, non-Hispanic black, non-Hispanic Asian, and we had to make sure that we were representative of where people shop. So we had to make sure for retail that we were in both grocery and package stores. Package being a liquor store like a Total Wine or something like that, grocery being a grocery store. And then in the mobile shop along, we had to make sure that we were representative of DTC, direct to consumer. So that could be a wine club, that could be, a winery, that could be an aggregator like a wine.com or something like that. And then a retail platform, which could be, Kroger.com or Safeway or whatever, the retail grocery location be. Then in on-premise, we had to make sure we were representative of restaurants and clubs or bars. Same thing in the online shopping. So net all the way at the bottom with 54 events, 16 were Hispanic, 8 were non-Hispanic white, 16 were non-Hispanic black, and 14 were Asian. But that's not good enough. That is absolutely not good enough because there are distinctions in country of origin. Despite nativity, it really doesn't matter necessarily where someone is born, but how were they brought up? And as you can see over there to the right, a Mexican descent consumer is very different from a Caribbean consumer, a Cuban, Puerto Rican, Dominican, and from a Central South American consumer. So we had to make sure we were somewhat representative. Obviously, in the quant, we were able to get much more detailed in that, but we needed direction in each one of those areas. And then within Asian, this was critical. South Asian people from India are very, very different than East Asian, Chinese, Japanese, Korean, from South Asian Pacific Islander, Filipino. And a lot of people don't realize Filipino is the third largest Asian group in the United States. So we had to make sure we were representative of that. And then we had to look at age deciles because people in their 20s were completely different from people in their 30s. And we learned a lot from that movement. When people hit 30, we really learned in this study, and it came about in the qual, and then we dug into it in the quant, that there's like a permission to drink wine. You hit 30 and it's like, okay, I'm relaxing more at home. I'm having kids. It's a little bit different than high energy pre-gaming in your 20s. And that was one of the biggest things that came out in the headlines of this project is millennials are the light at the end of the tunnel. When people get through their 20s and they get to their 30s, wow, there's like this light that goes on, this permission to drink wine. And how can we speed up that process so that younger people can be hitting that earlier? And then finally, right there, language. So language was critical as well. So particularly for Hispanics, we had to make sure that we had a bilingual moderator because people express their emotions many times much, much better in their native language. So what we did is we chose 3 moderators, all who were very experienced in doing this and had worked in multicultural work, for years. So David Akins, Marta Villanueva, and myself, and we divided up the people that I just showed you so that people felt comfortable and could express, their emotions by feeling comfortable about what they were saying and who they were talking to. So again, another eye chart, but I'm telling you this because this is critical. I mean, the sample, you would say, okay, 27 people, let's just pick 27 people. The detail that goes into who those people are so we can get what we needed was absolutely critical. And I've shown you the Asian, Black, Hispanic, Caucasian people that were in the study. This is their age, their education level, where they chose to shop, what their ethnic origin is. But also critical for this study was how they consumed wine, beer, spirits, seltzers, and other alcohol, and what price point they bought products in. So you can see the key down on the bottom. We asked them screener questions, and then we truncated out the people that drank wine much more than once a week. We didn't want experts. We wanted novice consumers, so we really understood what was bringing them into the wine business. We also didn't want people that rarely or never consumed, although I will say this, we did include, not in the qual, but in the quant, some non-adopters, so we could actually get things from them about why they do not choose to drink wine. So that was important. So you can see over here in this grid to the right, wine consumption. They're all 3 4s, 2 3 4s. So there were no 1s and there were no 5s or 6s. We truncated those people out, so we got these people that were drinking the right amount of wine. And then you can look at the price points they were buying over there to the right. So again, a lot of work went into the sample, and this is who they were. We ended up with 7 Asian, 8 Hispanic, 8 Black, 4 non-Hispanic whites from 10 different states. And those are little screenshots of all those people that we interviewed with the iTracks software. This is where they shop, the retail account classifications, grocery, liquor for on-premise. You can see casual restaurant, wine bar, brew pub, hotel, sports bar, tavern. So again, a lot of work went into that. So using the iTracks software, very, very important that you give people explicit instructions on what to do. And this is how we started. Gave them all information, their pre-assignment instructions. And it was part one and part two, as I mentioned, that the online shopping trip, we said a 5-10 minute video turned into about 15 to 20 for most people. And we said, go to your favorite online e-commerce place to buy. And we explained to them, the kind of things it could be. And we really want to learn about how you research the wine you're deciding to buy and how you use this site to decide. Show us your journey. And that was fascinating because many of these people had not actually shopped for wine online before, but they shopped for everything else online. So many of the females said, "Oh my gosh, this is just like Ulta Beauty and how I buy makeup. This is like Michael's and how I buy craft supplies." So they loved the opportunity to shop online for wine, and many had never done that before. And then we said, okay, then we're going to do a physical shopping trip, 75 minutes, hour and 15 minutes at your favorite location. Pick the place, uh, you know, download to your phone ahead of time. That's critical. Make sure that you've got that done and you can verify that they've downloaded. We actually had a tech person that we used. iTracks provided a tech person, and we used one of our people to be sure to do a tech check at the beginning to make sure everything was working properly. One thing I would say as you're using this software, make sure that Wi-Fi is good within that location. Very often, the retail locations or the on-premise locations had Wi-Fi, so we wanted them to tap into that Wi-Fi at the location because it works much more easily than if you're trying to do it, through just your cell phone connection. And my understanding is that it's much more expensive in Canada to do a cell phone data connection than it is in the United States. So there's a lot of reasons, but we did tell people, and this was an important thing, that if it's going to cost you anything because of that connection, we are willing to reimburse you, the small amount for that. So the instructions that you give people and the preparation that you put into this ahead of time to make sure that they're prepared is very, very important. All right. And then, these are the kind of views. So the group participant moderator view, this was critical. This is Marta, one of our moderators, talking to Venus, who's from Puerto Rico. And oh my gosh, Venus was golden. Her talking about the family and the smells and the sights in the kitchen. But the beauty of it is, look where Venus is. Venus is at the department, at the point of purchase, and she is so comfortable, and while she's walking through this store and looking at the food, and we could say, take us to the foods. What do you buy? What do you pair with? Look at the wine. What does that bring to mind to you? And the insights that come out of being physically at the point of purchase are invaluable. And that's why we love this software so much in doing the study. And then, this is the single person view. And this was very important, when pulling clips that we used in the study. And I'll show you a few of those here in just a minute. But this is Brandon, who was Indian from South Asia. And he gave us some great things about Indian food and about people of his culture. And just these little insights from having this representation of people of different ages, different ethnicities, different races was critical because that drove a lot of the questions that we dug into more deeply in the quant. The transcript is critical. Now, AI is available, and I think Crystal will talk more about this in a few minutes. We did use AI with this because realize we had 46 hours of video footage. So the ability to use AI to do some searching to find big topics was important. And that's one of the beauties of the iTrack software. But what we really found valuable was to come down to the minute by minute transcript. So, we obviously took notes as we were doing this, and we found things that people brought up that were really key that we could come back to. But very quickly, within minutes, you can download a minute by minute transcript of the moderator and the subject talking to each other. And this is Brandon, pulling out some things about his culture and what's important to him and what he looks for in wine. And we were able to then go to the video clips and say, okay, at 1:22:49, here's what Brandon said. And we were able to pull clips that we used in the study, which were golden and beautiful for everyone. So the transcripts and the fact that you can get them so quickly are very important, which we love. So let me just show you a few examples. So, here's one of each of the participants. This is Joey. Joey was a 24-year-old male, Hispanic, Mexican descent from Illinois. His retail location in Chicago was a Mariano's. His pre-shopping site was also marianos.com. He bought Chloe Pinot Grigio, which was his girlfriend's favorite wine. And he told us a lot about what it was like to drink beer. We asked him, when is wine not appropriate? And we asked everybody that question. That was one of the many, many questions we asked. But he said, well, there's social pressure on men to drink beer with sports. And that, people might look at you funny if you drink wine at a baseball game. So let's hear a lot about when Joey said wine is appropriate.
And it is a skill that I'd like to pick up because older, it's start to change. Everyone wants to, if you have guests over, a company over, you want to kind of put your best foot forward, especially if you move to a new neighborhood or you're making new friends. You want to have a good wine knowledge to back.
So there's Joey at the point of purchase, being, spurred on by the fact he's looking at these wines. He's overwhelmed by this department because there's so many wines, but he's saying, I need to know more. I need to, as I get older and I want to have respect in my neighborhood, I need to have a decent wine knowledge. So critical learning, very important thing early in the study to learn from Joey, 24-year-old Hispanic, Mexican descent. Then there was Amy. Amy was a non-Hispanic white from Illinois. We know how often she drinks wine. We know the wines that she chose when she was in the store. We know where she pre-shopped. And she tells us, which is critical, that she wouldn't drink wine at a crowded bar on a hot humor day. It's more conversational and good with friends, girls' nights out, and dinner parties. Ding, 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 ding. Sharing, food, comfort, relaxation, all important things that came out of the study. But in this one thing with Amy being comfortable in a wine department, here's what she told us.
I would say that they need to do more wine and sip events, or wine and something events, like painting, wine and pot, wine and watch a movie. I mean, just have more I think events to bring people out of their house, to go to this bar, to go to this wine cafe, to go.
So Amy's in her 20s and she's telling us wine is boring, that it's not active. You can't do it in an active event. So what are active events that wineries could actually do in their tasting rooms and other places to get people in their 20s to drink more wine? And she gives us some great suggestions that come out later. And that's one of the key findings. Wine is boring. How can we make it more exciting? Chris. Chris is from Illinois as well, African American, shopped at a Jewel Osco, goes to Cooper's Hawk. And, he told us some interesting things about wine, particularly for people in their 20s. The drinking age in the United States is now 21. For a lot of people, it was 18. But they do pre-gaming. They drink things that may be a higher proof before they go out. So, we talked about that. But then he also talked about the health benefits of wine, which was fascinating. Listen to what he said.
Now, I've been trying to get my friends back home to drink more wine because spirits and beers, like I said, it's not the healthiest thing to maintain. So, I've convinced some people, we getting older, we're getting a little bit more grown. So I'm like, all right, it's time to drink more wine. So I've convinced some people.
Health benefits of wine, something we really dug into that a lot of people feel. And then here's our friend in Brandon that I talked about before. Let's listen to a couple of things that Brandon said, which were critical in learning.
So I would be so curious as to what, my people are drinking because we're not really a culture that I think values alcohol a lot. So sometimes I feel like I'm an outlier. So if I were to see that, I would definitely walk in and definitely try and talk to the owner.
So as an Indian American, I feel often like an outlier because our people don't drink as much alcohol. So what would attract him? Follow-up question from the moderator. So tell me about what would attract you.
you know, like I said, like my 5 or 6 friends are all white and everything, so I have to chase some of my culture somewhere. So I do look for that familiar taste that I've always grown up with, which is spice and which is like heat or like a kick.
Spice, heat. He mentioned, you can see on the slide there, garam masala. We said, what is garam masala? So Brandon was able to walk us over and say, here it is. It's spices with cumin, coriander, cardamom, cloves, cinnamon, et cetera, et cetera. This is what I look for. Key learning at this point. If you're not aware of it, Asian Indian Americans have by far the highest household income in the United States, by far, not even close. No one else is even close. So if you are a product and you are trying to sell to the wealthiest consumers in the United States, it is Asian Indian Americans. And so understanding what these people are looking for could not be more critical. And that's why that sample that I talked about in the beginning was so important. If we had just, chosen other groups of Asians, we wouldn't have gotten this learning from South Asian Indians. I happen to be on the board of the Latino Hotel Association, and 2/3 of the hotels in America are owned by Asian American families. This is a group that needs to be understood, and you need to understand how to market your products to this group. So Brandon had some critical insights for us. Okay. So moving on, eye chart here, but what did we dig into? Obviously, with an hour and 15 minutes, we had a lot that we could dig into. So we dug into that whole funnel that I talked about in the beginning. We dug into occasions and questions about occasions. We dug into that awareness, how you first learn about wine, your consideration, where do you go, and what do you use to decide what to do, the actual purchase itself, price, size, other attributes that you look for, sustainability, et cetera, et cetera. Retention. What was the first wine experience? What are your preferences? Health and sustainability. And that was beautiful. We could talk to people and say, is sustainability important to you? And show me how you learn that. And somebody was able to pick up a wine, turn it around, show the back of it, and show us a sustainable tag that they had noticed that they wanted to know. But being at that point of purchase allowed them to do that using the itracks software. Advocacy. How do you discover new wines? How do you share? Are you an advocate? And then finally, a roadmap. We gave them a roadmap to connection with action steps along the way. All right. So I'm going to pull out just a quick few samples of some of the things that we learned. Occasions. What were the occasions shopped for? Okay, there's a ton here. But on the left side is that pre-online shopping trip. And on the right side is the physical location. So when we looked at what they did, we looked at the websites they bought from, aggregators like wine.com, et cetera, et cetera. The online occasions, what were they buying for? Restocking friends, dinner, relaxing, boom, 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 boom. All the things that wine owns. That was important. Wineries, you need to lean into what you own versus spirits, beer, and other alcoholic beverages. These are the things that you own that people are doing. Retail occasions and on-premise occasions, same kind of thing. So at the end of this, the very last thing we said is, okay, I want you to close your eyes. We've talked to you for over an hour. I want you to visualize the perfect wine drinking occasion. Where would you be? We've talked a ton about why you're here today, but if you could be at the perfect spot in your mind, describe that to us. Give us the sights, the sounds, who's there. Tell us about the perfect wine occasion. And this was fascinating because what we got when we classified this, good and bad. Elegant restaurant was by far number one. Now that's great because wine owns that versus beer, spirits, and other alcoholic beverages, particularly RTDs, ready to drink. But how often do you go to an elegant restaurant? So, we need to increase the occasions. Only 2 people described a casual meal setting. So how do we get wine to be more every day? But conversing with friends, sharing was critical. That was their ideal. This was fascinating. For all the Black consumers, outdoors came out, which was fascinating. And then kicking back kind of me time. A lot of young mothers talked about changing the diapers, giving a bath, putting the baby to bed, and then coming downstairs and sitting down with a glass of wine and a book or a movie. That was important, critical. All right, so we were able to classify these. And then, look at things like, okay, here's the total. Relaxation was number one at 2/3, followed by food, outside friends, conversation, family, restaurants. So wine owns these occasions here on the left. And there were nuances that relaxation was much bigger with people as they hit their 30s. And then high energy things were much bigger with people as they were in their 20s. And there were distinctions between the race ethnicity as well. So, we had to talk about active wine events and places where you could do things. So here was Mike, white 28-year-old male.
It's a time and place thing for me. And the only way I can see myself drinking more is if there's more of those times and places. That's really the deciding matter or factor for me for the most part. And I'm just not in enough scenarios where I'd be drinking wine by choice at least.
Mike was at a sports book. That was the on-premise location he chose, which is becoming a big, big deal with young males. So fascinating, but he was talking about time and place. But that also brought up the fact that there's discretionary income and that people spending money on sports betting might not be buying alcoholic beverages as much. So a lot of interesting things came out of where these people chose to be. So what did we do? We had clues for selling more wine. Number one was lean into and defend the moments that wine owns, relaxing, sharing, romantic, food connection, but also increase these high energy wine occasions, make wine relevant to them. That'll get younger people to drink wine. One of the absolute favorites of mine that came out was up here on the right side. And this was a wine bar in Portland, Oregon that did Taylor Swift nights. And they paired a bottle of wine with every era of Taylor Swift's tour. And they had lines literally around the block when they did this because they were making wine relevant to younger people. And that was the kind of thing that came out of this study. So wine department and menus, getting close to, a few of the other things that we found. This probably was one of the biggest things that we found, and it got a ton of press. This is Milagros. Milagros is in Miami. She's Cuban descent. And she was in a restaurant, a decent restaurant that had a wine list and a spirits list. And you can look at it on the right-hand side. That's your wine list. Look at it. There's like 3 words about every wine. Right below it is your cocktail list. Look at the pictures, the colors, the textures, the list of premium spirits that are available. But there's your wine list. So listen to Milagros.
Now, in terms of the options listed, I don't know a whole lot about the wines in general. So, like, a lot of this doesn't resonate with me. Because of that, okay, honestly, I would be inclined to completely avoid this section altogether.
Ouch! I would be completely inclined to completely avoid this section altogether, the wine list. So that was critical. I mean, there she is in her own words at the point of purchase using itracks, telling us I would look at these colorful things, but I wouldn't even look at wine. It's not important to me. So, one of the things that came out of the study were these recommendations here that 46% found spirit cocktails more exciting than wine. 72% said they would be likely to choose wine if a restaurant or bar offered a wine cocktail. And one of the females that we found, African-American in Buffalo, New York, actually bought a Loganberry wine slushie, which is pictured right there. And she talked about how important that was offered. So, recommendations that we came up with, we showed a little designed, colorful wine menu that they could do. And we just said that you wine marketers must demand better wine menus and lists. You should offer wine cocktails and work with your distributors to do that. The cultural impact, we found in these younger novice consumers, they weren't as aware of some of the culturally owned wineries, particularly things like the McBride sisters that own Black Girl Magic, Hispanic-owned companies, Asian-owned companies. So we talked a good bit about that. And one of the findings was that food is very important. I talked about Brandon in the beginning and pairing wine with Indian food. And we're proud of this article here in the Wine Enthusiast that came out shortly after the study last year that talked about pairing wine with Indian foods and some of the examples and what could be done. We talked a lot about wine and Mexican food. And, with the people of Mexican origin, obviously, and very much so with everyone else. They were thinking of tequila and margaritas when they went to a Mexican restaurant. So how can we increase wine list usage inside those? You know, and I happen to live in a town here in Texas with a Mexican restaurant that just opened that has an incredible wine list. And they're known for that all over the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex now, with people coming in to pair wines with different Mexican foods. But you know, that's something that wasn't being done by these wineries that really came out clearly in the study that could be done. Wine and Japanese food. You know, Mike, who we talked about a little bit before, Japanese 29-year-old male, doesn't like sake. So what does he pair sushi with? White wine, sparkling wine, things like that. So good learning about how to do it. So finally, the final that came out of all this was our roadmap. And this was really the close that we were able to say, okay, we took you through the 5 steps of the journey. We talked to all these people. We had all these interesting learnings, and we're going to dig into many more of these in the quant that we're going to do. But here are suggestions for all things like gamifying, talking about culture, pairing wine with culturally relevant foods. Biggest one, make wine fun. Make it fun. Don't make it boring. Lean into online shopping, social media, what to do with it, using TikTok. TikTok, you know, Book Talk has changed the publishing industry. TikTok should be changing the wine industry, because many of you may not know, but last August, the actual usage cases of people who use TikTok crossed 50% for people over 21 years old. So at that point, it became legal to advertise alcohol on TikTok. So big deal for this industry. Specific suggestions for retailers and on-premise, more specific for on-premise and retailers over there on the left, and finally suggestions for winemakers, how to talk about their wine, what to do. And that is the study. And we're very proud of this page. These are some examples of the press coverage that we've received since we did these webinars. We did a webinar last year in the fall after the qual, and then we did another webinar at the end of the year after the quant, you know, which really was the final that involved both phases. And this is some of the press. Young adults find restaurant wine lists uninspiring. I mentioned that to you. Milagros helped us with that, and boom, there's the press. Market research shows how to win up and coming consumers. Why did wine have to go and make things so complicated? That was one of the first, you know, Taylor Swift things that came out there at the beginning, and that was fun. Or I should say, was that Avril Lavigne? Somebody help me with that.
Avril Lavigne, go
Avril
Canada.
Lavigne, that was it. Yeah, and she's Canadian, I think. So there you go. And then Wine Market Council launches study. And then just last week, I was in Miami at a conference called Vin Expo, which was 2,300 people from, I think, 42 countries. And they were in the US trying to market their wines to young people. And we presented the results of this study there. So a lot of great exposure that we've gotten, that the Wine Market Council has gotten. We're very proud of this study. And thanks to itracks, it was a booming success. So thank you. That is what I have to share. Crystal, back to you.
Thanks so much, Mike. That was incredible. And I'm really appreciative of you coming to share that with us. There are a few questions in here. We're going to come to them in a couple minutes here. If you have a question that you haven't submitted yet, submit it now, and we'll take a look. But first, I am going to do a little bit of a closer look at a couple pieces of the tech that Mike mentioned that they used for their studies. So first, I am going to show you how you would do a shop along with itracks technologies. So let me get my screen share going here. All right, so this is what it looks like if you are doing a shop along with itracks. They're using the itracks real-time app that Mike mentioned in his portion of the presentation. You would get them to download the app before they participate in the shop along. And the view that you're seeing here is from that of an observer. So itracks real-time, if you've never used it, has an observer backroom. So this is a space that is set aside for like stakeholders. Maybe you'd have like your marketing director for your end client in there, a research assistant. It's a space where these people can talk, both using a chat function and actually, you know, with video and audio. And the moderator can communicate with them if they want, or they can mute them if they want to focus on the participant, but the participant cannot see them. So this is the view of those observers. So we can see them here. I'm one of them in this little collage here. And then over here, you can see what's going on with the participants. So this is our moderator here. And then this is the camera that the participant is using. They've got it facing outwards because they're doing a shop along right now. But if they were to flip their camera back around, you would see the participant's face. And then this is a screen share. So they were actually doing a screen share while they were out on location. So Mike talked about in his, they did an online shopping portion. You would use this for that as well. But you can do that when you're actually out and about at the retail locations as well. So I'll show you just a quick little video for this one. I'm doing it as a video just because like it's a shop along and I'm obviously not in a store. I'm in an office here. So I do have one recorded that I will show you just to get an idea of what it actually looks like when you are out in the store. So here we go.
Everybody see Kat on the left side of your screen. I see a couple of thumbs up, so I'm going to go with yes. Perfect. Okay. Hi, Kat. Thanks for joining us today. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you guys.
So it looks like the tech is working well. So I'm going to get you to go ahead and walk into the store. And as you are walking, you can go ahead and start moving. I'll talk to you as you go here.
Sure.
As you start walking, I'm going to ask her to turn the camera around so that we can kind of see what she's looking at as she's going into the store. So, you know, as an example here, as Kat is walking up, I might be asking things like, Kat, why is this your normal grocery store? Why do you shop at this place in particular?
So I shop at this.
Okay, and then this is a little long, so I'll skip ahead to the part. So in this particular shop along demo, she's shopping for soup. So she ends up in the soup aisle. And let's see.
So one last thing, Kat, as you shop in the store, sometimes you buy things that you may not be super familiar with. Do you ever look for information online about a product while you're in store?
I do look at reviews.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm going to see if I can see your screen. And why don't you take a look at the reviews for this particular product, just so we can see what you would normally be looking at.
For sure. Okay, I'll just show you my screen here. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So I would just go on Google and then I would look at the reviews here.
Okay, awesome.
Okay, so that is what it would look like to do a shop along with a screen share. And again, that's from the observer view. So you can see our observers over here. If you had, say, someone who worked in marketing for Campbell's who wanted to get some opinions on, you know, what does she think of the site? Did she find what she needed really easily? What does she think of the can? Then that person can then communicate with the moderator, who can then relay those questions to Kathlena, who is doing the shop along. So any questions about that, let us know in the Q&A. The second thing I'm going to show you is something Mike mentioned, and that was creating the highlight reels. So as you mentioned, there's a couple ways that you can do this. Right now, I am in the itracks platform. This is a project that was completed where we talked about travel. So we did a focus group and some IDIs, talked about different kinds of vacations that people would book, cruises, all-inclusives, you know, vacations where they were staying in less touristy areas. And after that was completed, immediately we have access to transcripts and we have access to our new analysis assistant, which is AI enabled, and which is where you would build the highlight reels. So that's where I am right now, is in that analysis section. To get there, after you're done your study, you would go to analysis and you would go project insights. And then we end up in here. So we're going to create a new highlight reel. And there are a couple of different ways that we could do this, which Mike mentioned. So I'm having some slow internet here, so forgive me. But let's get started with a highlight reel. We'll call it cruise highlights. We'll talk about cruises. So we will open the editor. There's some options you can see down there. I'm not going to spend a bunch of time on those, but you can control who sees it, who can edit your reels, that kind of thing, if you want observers to have access or not. And from here, I am going to start inserting some clips. So we'll go here, and here is where the AI comes in. So you can see the AI has access to all my transcripts and everything. And if I want to really quickly find, some clips that have to do with cruises, because that's what we're talking about, I can go keywords. I can say, okay, let's look through here. What do we want to talk about? Oh, cruises, perfect. We'll click cruise. And it's got a bunch of options for clips for me. So you can preview them.
So next topic, I'd like to talk about cruises.
There, so sure, let's include that clip. Let's include the one under it. We'll insert it. And then we'll go in here and then we can tweak our clips. So again, we can preview them.
So next topic, I'd like to talk about cruises. By show of hands, who here has been on a cruise?
Okay, so let's say we like that clip, we can leave it as is, or we want to see the hands go up, right? We didn't get to see that. So let's extend it for a few seconds. We can manually edit our time codes and we can make sure that it's exactly the clip that we want. The other way that you can do it, and Mike mentioned that this is what they used. I use this too because AI is great. It's not perfect. So sometimes it doesn't pick up all of the keywords that you wanted. So in this study, I remember in particular, there was a really great quote from Rachel, and it had to do with predictability. And it didn't show up initially when I was looking in keywords. Predictability wasn't in there. So what I'll do instead is I've got the transcript that was automatically downloaded, it was automatically generated, and then I downloaded it after my project was done. And I'll do a little search here and I'll look for predictability. So there it is. That's that quote from Rachel. If you want to change, so she's called participant 3 here. If you want to change that to Rachel, you can do that within the analysis assistant as well. But I can see here that the timestamp for this bit about predictability was, we've got one happening at 7:11 and we've got another one. This is the one that I like. Starting at 3:17. You can see right there, it says it in the transcript. So let's go and let's make a clip starting at 3:17. And then what I like to do is I take another look at my transcript. I see when the next person started talking. So that's me, the moderator, at 3:42. And we'll end it right before that. And we'll see if that ends up how we wanted it to. So let's preview this clip now and see if it captures the quote that we want.
Again, I think I agree with Dan. I think it's the predictability of it. I find a lot of the regular trips that we do, again, like I was telling you earlier, was the road trips, right? And it's very much you get somewhere at night and you have to find somewhere to stay. You don't plan ahead as much, which can be a lot of fun. But also I really like the kind of, you know what you're getting into, what it's going to be like this.
Okay, so it cut Rachel off a bit, so I'll just extend that by a few seconds. And then the other thing that I want to do here is I only want to see Rachel. I don't want to see the whole group or everybody listening or not listening to Rachel. I don't need to see the moderator. So I'm going to switch it from a group recording to, oh my goodness, do we remember which participant Rachel was? I think she was participant 3, but let's see. We can test that out.
Again, I think I agree with Dan. I think it's the predictability of it. I find a lot of
Perfect. So then from there we have that clip, and this will create a whole reel from us. So if we want just this clip, we would get rid of all of this other stuff and we would just have this little clip that we made of Rachel. We would save and render that, or we can compile them with a whole bunch of other clips. We can rearrange them into whatever order that we want and make a whole reel about it, or a whole reel of it that we can share or download. So that is the highlight reel builder. And with that, I will get on to questions. So I will stop sharing my screen here. And we have a whole bunch of questions that came in. Again, submit them if you haven't yet. If this goes over time and you have to leave, we will distribute this recording. And Mike, are you ready for our first question?
Absolutely. Let's go.
Okay, so Elena she writes, how were you able to secure young consumers in their early 20s to participate in this research? Were there any incentives for participants, and did you have any challenges with these participants staying engaged throughout the study?
You know, it was interesting. The fact that we used this software on their smartphones made it very easy to recruit these younger people to do this. Obviously, we had to give a pretty, substantial incentive because we spent an hour and a half with these people over a 2-day period. So, the incentive was important. But the fact that it was kind of gamified and on their smartphone made it really exciting for them, much more so than, hey, I'm going to go to a focus group and sit in a room with a glass one-way mirror and, I'm going to be like an animal in a zoo. And they love the fact that they could do this on their phones. And I think that's the beauty of the iTrack software. So I would say that made it much easier to do this study.
Thanks, Mike. Roisin has asked, what would you change from the methodology if you were conducting this research again, and what would you recommend from iTracks for similar studies?
Yeah, I would say, what was really, but there were a lot of things that were really important, and this may answer a couple of the questions, but make sure that there is a tech person at the beginning. It works to have a tech person and then a moderator, and that tech person has the people, come into the software, the app, do it 10 minutes before, make sure that everything is working properly. Typically we would start, and this is important, that a lot of this was an IDI in a sense. It was an in-depth interview. So before they even started walking around the store, we asked them a lot of questions about, different things, their wine knowledge and why they were there today, that kind of thing. So, that could either be done, it should be done in a different location. So many of the stores had a cafe. We had them go sit down at the cafe, make sure with the tech person that the internet was working properly, et cetera. And then when everything is ready and we've verified that, boom, it gets handed over to the moderator. So at that point, the moderator is, dealing with someone with everything working and, used to it. It's already been talking to the tech person. So that's critical, have the right number of people involved, have multiple locations, so they feel comfortable, have a moderator that will make them feel comfortable. All those things I think are important. And I would say that one of the challenges that we had, and this is important, some of the stores were a little bit tougher with dead spots in the internet as they walked around. So, that can be a challenge, but the moderator has got to be schooled on that. So they can say, hey, got a little issue. Could you walk back to where you were a minute ago or something like that? And that makes sure that everything's working properly. So, just be aware that there could be issues like that. Have a tech person ready to help you at that point. And I would say those are improvements that could be made. And I think, Crystal, you'll probably talk about or have that this was done almost a year ago by us. So there have been improvements made with you guys since that time on some things.
Yes, absolutely. And that's one of the perks of having the subscription is you get all of those upgrades as they come in. And we have done some things specifically to make shop-alongs easier and more successful. So that was a really important development for us. And that tech person that you talked about, Mike. So for anyone listening, if you want to make sure that you have that person who can, personally interact with the participant beforehand, make sure everything's running properly. That's called the concierge service. So to access that, just when you book a new project, there's a little checkbox that you can make sure is checked off to make sure you have concierge service. You don't always need it, but sometimes for things like shop-alongs, it's nice to have. That's how you would get that. Okay, now Margaret has asked, any recommendations for making it easy to do the IDI in the store? And I think you talked about a few of these things, Mike, making sure that they can connect to the Wi-Fi, but anything else that you would recommend?
The ability to walk around the store is critical. And that's I would say, one of the important things about doing the IDI in the store versus doing it, stagnant. Or I think somebody else had asked a question about whether you can hang the phone around your neck so you can use both hands. That really, with the ability to have a phone and you can easily switch from a selfie view to seeing what the person is seeing, that kind of takes away the need for that. And, I think we probably all have done interviews before with a camera crew in a store and a big camera. And, the beauty of this is, and this is kind of off the record to all of you on here, if you're going to do that kind of an interview, very often, you need to go through a lot of approvals with a chain and upper management and that kind of thing to walk that group of people, that entourage into a store. But in all honesty, go into any grocery store that you shop at tonight, and half the people, at least, if not more, are talking to somebody on their phone already. So, I mean, it's a very unobtrusive way to do these interviews. And really very interesting. We actually had some people go up to a wine steward who happened to be in a department and talk to them. We had somebody go up to a bartender in one of the bars and talk to them about what people like them are ordering. And, we got some fascinating things from that. So, the ability to be flexible because you've got this software. And that's the beauty of it, I would say, is that obviously we have a moderator guide and we have to get through all those questions and we have times that we're supposed to be allowing to each section. But the beauty of this is it went in a lot of directions that we didn't expect. And the moderator was able to run with that, and learn other things that weren't just rote. And that led a lot of conversations and brought up a lot of issues that, many of the wineries didn't even expect, which was fun.
Awesome. Okay, so let's have a look. Oh, we had someone ask from the chat, did you see a decline in drinking in general among Gen Z buyers?
Yeah, there's so much press. I showed you the press at the beginning, and I mean, my God, the whole world is gloom and doom. And yes, Gen Z is not drinking anything. And then, we actually supported some of those stereotypes, and we threw cold water on some of those stereotypes. One of the biggest was the fact that, well, marijuana is replacing alcoholic beverages. And what we actually found is the people that were the most frequent wine consumers were also the most frequent marijuana users for the most part. So it was more of a general health and wellness trend in not doing anything that was altering, and not that marijuana was replacing it. Obviously Gen Z is doing things differently than millennials, but what we found, and I showed you the Joey clip at the very beginning about learning more about wine as he gets older. What we found is millennials are the savior of the industry. The millennials have already passed Gen X in terms of how much they drink wine. They're almost catching boomers who are dying out over time. So there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and it happens when people get to their late 20s and early 30s. And how do we build on that? And I think that was, really insightful from the study, and it gave people hope. If you can give people hope in a step, and I think we gave people hope and some steps that they could take to take advantage of these people that are drinking more wine. And that was the beauty of the study.
Awesome. And then one last question. Pam is wondering specifically what the incentive was and if you tested various price points in wine.
At various price points in wine or in the incentive? Yeah,
in
the incentive.
Wine, yeah.
Yeah, in wine, absolutely. I mean, we talked a lot about what they consume. Remember, there was a screener about that. I showed you that page with all the numbers, and there was a screener about price points that they buy. So we wanted to make sure that, we had a robust example, and because we were looking for more novice drinkers, we really didn't want people that were buying $50 bottles of wine every day, because that really wasn't the crux of this study in trying to get new drinkers. So, that was important to the study, the screener about that. So absolutely, we knew what price points they were buying. And we talked a lot about gateway wines to them. What was the first wine you tried? Do you still drink that wine? Moscato for a lot of consumers is a gateway wine. And do you still drink it? If you started on that, do you still drink it? Or have you graduated into other things? Or do you prefer that? Do you like fruitier wines? What alcohol percent do you drink? And that's critical. I mean, there's a wine like Stella Rosa, which is one of the biggest gateway wines. People don't realize the majority of those are only 5% alcohol. And a typical wine is more like 12 or 13. But another wine, which is a gateway wine, was XXL, which is 16% and advertised on the label in big numbers, 16%. And there are TikTok influencers all over TikTok making cocktails with XXL. So we learned so many things from these people that gateway wines could be different things. It was fascinating.
Interesting. And then I had one question that came in via the chat. I'll take this one from Sonia. She had asked if you can combine the two clips together into one reel in the highlight reel creator. Yes, you can combine different clips into a highlight reel, make it as long as you want. And as long as everything's within the same project, you can combine clips from different focus groups or interviews into one highlight reel as well. Okay, so thank you so much, Mike. I'm seeing a whole bunch of things in the chat about how interesting this was and how great the presentation was. So we are really grateful that you were able to join us today. Anyone, again, who's looking for the recording, that will come from me via your email. So keep an eye out for that in the next day or two. And with that, thanks again, Mike. If you have any other questions for us, you can reach us at communications@itracks.com. Or if you have something for Mike, let me know and I can forward all of that on to him too. So thanks
Crystal.
again, and please enjoy the rest of your day.
I really appreciate it. And, our specialty is cultural research. So, if you have an interest in that, we'd love to talk. Thank you.
Great. And again, that's Ethnifacts LLC. Thank you.